Hello everyone, Nazdrovya. It's time to look at the chart of Russia, which I've never actually done before. So we're going to have a little chat, throw in some interesting tidbits, and talk about the current situation. Will it lead to war? What's it all about? What's happening? Who are the players? And I thought I'm going to start by looking at the Russian chart there, this is interesting because this is one of like the what would I say, the most ancient chart I've looked at, because it goes back to 862, the Julian calendar. Wow, I think the only one I've ever looked at that goes this far back is Scotland, but I never really vlogged on it, so that's fascinating. And I'm just going to say to you that first up, I want to mention that the Sun and Saturn are in a total conjunction. I mean, an exact conjunction at 1 degree and 17 minutes, which stood out as something for me, particularly because it's here on their midheaven. By the way, this is for Novgorod, not Moscow. That stood out because, you know, Saturn worship, the cult of Saturn, I've talked about it in my video on Khazaria, which is over on BitChute. Saturn is so key in terms of the symbolism to the Illuminati. And I think this is a country that the Illuminati desperately want to get their hands on, and they have had control over it over various times, but never totally. And I just thought it was interesting that that aspect is so exact. Okay, and also again we have the number 29, which I call unlucky, other people call karmic, but it is a very interesting number, and we know that Russia has suffered a lot of fate, hasn't it? You know, it's such a vast country, such extreme weather, and they've had quite an extreme history, yet very interesting history. Note the houses in the ninth house. It is a country strongly associated with Orthodox Christianity, something which has kept it strong, and it's possible being revived by Putin. Because Sun Saturn right on the midheaven, it shows they've always had to have strong leaders, often brutal leaders, but really strong leaders to just hold that whole show together. Always plenty going on behind the scenes, a lot of passion. Look there, Venus in Scorpio in the 12th. I think there's always plots, agendas, something going on in Russia. It's a country where what's invisible is essential, isn't it? More is going on underneath the surface than on the actual surface. And of course, we have Venus ruling the midheaven in the 12th, the house of bureaucracy. There's sort of an association there with communism. Communism is ruled by committee, and that kind of says it. Hey, Libra rising, Venus, sorry, I hope I didn't call it Mercury, in the 12th in Scorpio. That's kind of very, very, very controlling, big scope for corruption there. And we know at the moment it's almost like a gangster state. It's just so difficult to control. It's quite a lot of ethnic groups, different languages, ancient animosities, etc., etc. As you would expect, we've got both our moon and Mars in the 8th house, which again, it's alluding to the kind of bloody history that Russia had. What's that book called? Oh, forget it now. But I just want to mention here Neptune going into the 3rd house, Neptune in Aquarius. It's on the cusp of the 3rd house. More authors in Russia, I think, than any other country, or it's more authors per capita. So wonderful literary history, you know, from Solzhenitsyn, Dostoevsky. I mean, there's just so many famous Russian writers. There is something very imaginative and poetic that runs in the blood. Literature totally runs in the blood. Pluto in the 4th house again, like I say, with these 8th house planets. Yes, such a country that is so war-torn, so full of angst, and yet so many people there are psychic. I don't know if you guys ever read the book. It was an excellent book, but very poorly written. I think they needed some editing. It was called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. It was by Sheila Ostrander and Linda, can't forget, Lynn Ostrander and Sheila, I can't forget her name. It was a very good book, and it showed that from Stalin on to the other leaders, there was this big, huge emphasis on psychic research. Everything from psychotronic tools, Kirlian photography, remote viewing. They went in depth. And when Russia, the Soviet Union, collapsed in 1991, I think it was people from Brown's University, one of the big New York universities, but I don't think it was Columbia anyway. They went over, and their big priority was to get all the literature on the psychic research, and that's all stored in Washington somewhere. They made amazing progress on that. They really wanted to see if that was the way that they could win the Cold War, gain an advantage. Something I must mention it's in this book, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. They found that viruses themselves have a form of telepathy. And if they put viruses in a contained jar, right, so they couldn't escape, they were in a contained jar, and they found that they could telepathically infect people. I mean, that's kind of out there, but you know, it's worth thinking about, because a lot of these things people are now talking about with the, you know, we're not allowed to say the G and the thing and the graphene all linking up. Those concepts were explored in the Soviet Union in their psychic research. They were looking at everything like that. They were looking at, and they also were looking at not silent weapons for quiet wars. No, not that. They were looking at almost microwave weapons and using ultra low frequencies and aiming them at like the US embassy to make people sick. So there was a lot of that going on. So here, the psychic research, and I do believe that the Soviet Union was tapping into a ready pool of knowledge because so many people in that country are psychic. And I think it's because of the hugely extreme weather conditions and because so many people live so remotely and because it's difficult to survive there, really. So many people are so cut off and, you know, it's so freezing cold, then it's hot. You've really got to manage your resources very carefully to survive. And a lot of people have developed psychic ability to a very high degree just as a way of surviving. I always remember a story of a lady who was able to feel colors through her fingers. So she could interpret a whole picture by just running her hand over it and feeling where the different colors were. And she lived in a village where an awful lot of people were blind. And she wasn't blind, but she developed this skill and then was able to teach it to people who were blind. And I thought, gee, that's quite fascinating. So I've kind of got off topic. Jupiter here, I just like to say, Jupiter, this in the house of allies, I think that's China. It's a very strong ally of Russia. But let's now look at I've done here the solar directions for the Crimean War. So let's just have a look at some of those because I want to compare them to what's happening now. So this is solar arc for the Crimean War. Most important thing is the natal exact Sun-Saturn conjunction is conjunct Jupiter. So Jupiter was triggered there, the Crimean War. Jupiter's intercepted in the first, which is sort of a bit unlucky, and that indicates a threat to the integrity of the country, so war on their turf, that sort of thing. Also, the ascendant progressed as conjunct Mars in the 8th, in Leo, so Mars is more violent in Leo, lots of imperialism. Apparently this was the era when the phrase jingo a stick was born. It was a totally pointless war. It was all about the egos of the various empires at the time. I think that's reflected. So we see Mars triggered. We also see solar arc Mercury triggering Uranus, which is also in the 8th, so another trigger to an 8th house, upheaval, destruction, could have been collapse of the economy, great suffering, losses, and death, okay, triggering there. And solar arc Uranus is conjunct Saturn. Very important. No, it's not. Where is it? Solar arc Uranus is affecting. Yeah, there you go. There's solar arc Uranus there. It's right at the bottom near the IC, and it's opposing Sun conjunct Saturn, right? So that would be the leadership of the country. Saturn indicating great difficulty as well, and also must have been a lot of financial losses. And of course, Sun rules the 9th. Not sure. I don't know enough about the Crimean War to interpret that one. Let's have a quick look at what transits were in operation at the time of the Crimean War. You will see that Uranus is in Taurus. Oh yes, very interesting. We have in Taurus, Uranus is entering Taurus, and it's in Taurus now, right? So bear that in mind. That was quite important. Saturn is also heading into Taurus. There you go. And Pluto is heading into Taurus. So a lot of transits, a lot of stuff going on in Taurus for the time of this Crimean War. And Neptune is in Pisces, very much like it is now. So as it goes through Taurus, it would have been triggering Mars here, opposite Neptune, and possibly also Venus. So that's quite important for the Crimean War. We'll come back and we'll analyze that. Next chart we're going to have a look at for Russia is World War II. So let's just go down a little bit. Here's World War II transits. There you go. I think this is actually solar arc directions we're going to do first. And what's important to note here is that solar arc moon. Let's have a look. Where's solar arc moon? Solar arc moon down here in Pisces. No, that is not what I'm looking for. This is solar arc directions January. Oh no, that's solar arc directions also. I think that's again for, that is also for Crimea. So let's just ignore that one for the moment and go over to the transits. That's better. Event, aha. Oh, is that still giving me the same thing? No. Event chart. Okay, I'm just going to have a look at this, guys, and see what's going on here. Okay, we're back to organization. So now I can show you what I was intending to there. Is it up? No. Oh gosh, this really is being irritating today. Hold on 1 second. Okay, I was wanting to show you both the solar arcs and the transit for 1940, so World War II, but it didn't come up. You can see there the natal chart of Russia, which of course is a Libra, and I just should have mentioned. There's the solar arc directions. I put it for January 1940, and you see, most importantly, in terms of the solar arc directions, again, moon, solar arc moon is triggering Jupiter. Jupiter in the house of enemies, right? So that was triggered. Nothing else particularly significant other than, I'd say, Sun, Saturn, and the midheaven conjunct the North Node. So a particularly defining moment in their history. The nodes always involve something a little bit unpleasant. So let's just pop to the transits, which are really interesting. So like now, Uranus is in Taurus and will be at a similar position in Taurus. And of course, Uranus in Taurus is triggering Mars there in Leo. And then we saw that in the Crimean War, Mars in Leo was triggered, right? It'd also be triggering Venus there in Scorpio. Also, to a lesser extent, Neptune going into the third house, right? So Uranus active. Now, Saturn at the moment is Aquarius, but here you can see it was headed into Taurus. So eventually Saturn would have conjuncted Uranus in Taurus and been affecting the other fixed planets. And this time you don't have exactly that scenario, but you do have Saturn going through Aquarius. So it's kind of a similar setup in terms of the energies of those planets working together in fixed signs. What is also interesting is Pluto has just gone into Leo, and very shortly in the next few years Pluto will be going into Aquarius. And Neptune, let's just take a look at Neptune. Neptune was conjunct the Sun, or moving to conjunct the Sun, which of course is Sun Saturn, which is of 1 degree of Libra. And right now, where's Neptune? It's in the latter stages of Pisces, moving to oppose Sun Saturn. Why I think this is, look, Pluto's not quite there yet. It's not quite here. It was entering Leo. We're not quite entering Aquarius. And Neptune's not quite opposing that yet, the Sun Saturn. That's why I don't think the big confrontation with Russia is going to happen yet. Although I do think August, September is certainly a date to watch. Let's just have a quick look at what's going on here in terms of the Crimea we looked at. Here we have event chart and transits. That's for right now. So there you can see Uranus is moving through Taurus, where it will be squaring Mars, and at the same time Saturn is down here in Aquarius, where it will be opposing Mars, squaring Venus. I think this is all quite important. We don't see any major planets, however, triggering Uranus and Jupiter as we did in Crimea. And therefore, I'm wondering if this is the major event. I don't think it will be, although I do think we should watch August, September for certain things happening in terms of Russia. But as I say, when you see that Crimean chart and the World War II chart, it's just not as much happening. If we go here and have a look at where the solar arcs are, we do see that Pluto's solar arc has triggered Jupiter, but that was kind of 2 years ago, and nothing's happened. So maybe that's still pending. So that's a curious one. So we have had Jupiter in the house of enemies triggered, and yet that hasn't yet given rise to anything as it did with Crimea and in World War II when Jupiter was triggered, as we saw in those charts. We also have a failure of Mars to be triggered. Look, there's nothing triggering Mars this time. Is there anything triggering, I think it was Mercury was the other planet? No. We do have Moon here, solar arc moving to be conjunct the North Node, but I also don't feel that's strong enough to bring anything about right now. And in terms of this very important conjunction of Sun, Saturn in the midheaven, it's hanging around here in the early degrees of Sag by solar arc. So that's not particularly triggering either. So we don't see as strong a signs as we did in Crimea and World War II. So that means that maybe there's not a lot of action taking place right now, although with the Uranus Saturn I do expect something to be happening. But like I say, let's hold off. I don't think this is the major event. Now there's going to be a part 2 of this. I might put it on YouTube, otherwise it'll be BitChute, and that's when I'll give more of my opinions and my political ideas and analysis about what's actually going on now. It'll probably be tomorrow, so do keep a lookout for that. This was just to have a look at the charts, to compare it to 2 major points in Russian history, to see if there are any strong correlations, and we're not actually seeing that, except with the transits. Okay, for now we're seeing a little bit of indication of conflict and trouble and drama, but nothing that big. Although I would say in the April ingress chart of Russia, set at Moscow this time, the sun is on the descendant, which does say that, seems to show that enemies are gathering. But because the sun is involved, it shows to me also that Russia is consolidating and growing in strength, very much so for the coming year. So it's a time of increasing strength of Russia, right? Not decreasing, but her adversaries are also are nagging and gnawing and getting ever closer as well. So the enemies are encroaching, but her strength is increasing.